When the Prophet Muhammad died in the 8th century in June 632, he did one of the worst mistakes any great leader can commit: not produce a male heir. Thus, a feud between his followers for who would take the mantle of leader of the new Islamic faith, or Caliph, began. Most of his followers agreed that the elite of the group should choose his successor. In this case, they would choose Abu Bakr as his successor and first Caliph. A minority of people, though, believed that instead, the successor of the Prophet should be one of his family members and/or descendants. For them, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib should be the next ruler. The followers of Abu Bakr, now known as the lawful or Sunnis in Arabic, were the majority, so they won out against the supporters of Ali, now known as the Shiites, which in Arabic is supporters of Ali. Abu Bakr would become the first caliph, and the next 3 caliphs were also considered Sunnis. This would be the beginning of the split between the two sects of Islam, as in the Shiites would always refuse the legitimacy of the first 3 caliphs and consider Ali as the only true successor of the Prophet, and Sunni caliphs would only bring doom and false messages to the Muslim world. Now, why is this important? Well, this is the basic understanding of medieval Muslim history moving forward, as even though both sects would be relatively peaceful to one another for the next millennia, the theological debate could get quite violent, just like their Christian counterparts. Now, let's move forward a couple of hundred years into the 9th century, to the Persian Gulf on the other side of the Arabian Desert. The world has seen much change since the days of the first Caliphate. Islam is now one of the leading beliefs in the world, spanning from Iberia all the way to Bangladesh. Infighting between the Muslim brothers is the norm. 3 separate caliphates have risen to rid the former from power in a bid to reform and theological change, and multiple branches of Islam have risen next to the Shiites and Sunnis. One of the new interpretations was Ishmaelism, a new branch of Shia Islam that became relevant in the Abbasid Caliphate as it was fracturing in Mesopotamia. Ishmaelism came into being when a group of Shia Muslims did not recognize the death of the 6th spiritual successor of the Prophet Muhammad, or Imam, Muhammad ibn Ishmael. They believed that he had not died, but instead came to a higher state of existence, claiming that he had in fact become the Mahdi, or Messiah, a figure that would come to the mortal realm to rid the world of evil and darkness. This group would split into multiple groups as they disagreed on what to do with this new godly information. Some went to Africa and would later found the Fatimid Caliphate, others went to Syria and moved to the great city of Salamiyya, and others like the leader Al-Hussein al-Hazwazi would go to Khuzestan, Persia, where he met the man that finally starts our story, Hamdan Qarmat, in 872. Here's the funny thing, Hamdan would convert to Ishmaelism, but he hated the Ishmaelis. He thought they were fucking cringe, openly opposing and distancing himself from the group. But then the leaders killed his brother as a warning, and he kept quiet for a bit, even becoming a missionary for the Imam. But his hatred never stopped growing, as he would then start a splinter group of Ishmaelism named after himself, the Qarmatians. Hamdan Qarmat would disappear from the records in 899, but this was also the date where his followers would start revolts, riots, and general tomfoolery in the Abbasid Sunni Holdings. The state of Qarmat would officially become a political entity when Hajar and Al-Hassad, the capitals of Bahrain at the time, were captured in 899 by the new leader Abu Tahir al-Janabi, a Persian pirate, when the Abbasids were too busy with other conflicts and distracted to deal with the matter, thus carving themselves a new state without much whiplash. Abu Tahir had a large holding of the Persian Gulf in his new domain. So what would he do to consolidate his power? Start trade deals? Invest in a stable military? Install a succession plan? Lol, no. Abu Tahir would take this time to create a new utopian society where all residents would be exempt from manual labor. Every man was equal. If a man was strapped for cash, they could simply ask for a loan, and the new state would just give them money, just like that. This was possible as their territorial holdings made them unfathomably rich from trade and exporting expensive fruits that were cultivated on their islands. And no Qarmatian needed to work manual labor, as they had a massive slave population of captured Ethiopians and Indian villagers from the Omanese slave trade, spanning the tens of thousands of African and Indian workers. Well, I guess old habits die hard, am I right? To make it short, the Qarmatians' way of life and political system had changed and morphed into a whole new system of government, alien to most of the Orient, having lost almost all similarities to their Ishmaeli cousins of Cairo in Africa and Salamiyah in Syria. They had become truly a unique player in the Middle Eastern affairs. The Qarmatians would now make themselves a force to be reckoned with in 902 ACE, as they would continue to spur revolts around Arabia and raid trading vessels all over the Persian Gulf. But worst of all, as they considered all other interpretations of the Quran as complete nonsense that has the same value as your opinion when I calmly inform you that I am in your walls. They would thus engage in raids on pilgrimage routes, slaughtering any pilgrim they found and steal their valuables. One of the worst raids was in 906, when they ambushed a massive pilgrimage caravan coming back from Mecca and slaughtered 20,000 men, women, and children, and left with hundreds of kilos of gold and other valuables. Now, with all this senseless slaughter of Sunnis, what were the Abbasids doing? I mean, they are the Caliphate after all, supposedly the most powerful and respected power in the Muslim world under their spiritual leader of the faith, the Caliph, and for some reason they were seemingly doing nothing to stop these hooligans who are ravaging their trade routes in their backyard. Surely they could easily deal with these no-good pirates with their massive armies and navies, right? Well, you see, the Caliphate was a shadow of its former self, because it was being governed by the equivalence of snakes on crack, sneaky yet useless in open confrontation. They were so useless that Abu Tahir would attempt to pillage all of Mesopotamia in 927, almost looting Baghdad itself, but they would be halted by the Caliph al-Muqtadir, who stopped them by basically going, Hey, you want some money? Tributaries to the Qarmatians, and giving them more trading rights to the Persian Gulf, because they didn't have enough of that. Not satisfied, the Qarmatians would finally commit their magnum opus of a war crime in 930. Abu Tahir would organize an invasion of Mecca to sack it dry. While Mecca was celebrating the Hajj, a religious pilgrimage of all Sunni Muslims from across the known world, who would come to Mecca to worship the Kaaba, the house of God, the Qarmatians would launch an all-out assault on the holy city. The event was harrowing, as thousands died to the sword and holy relics were looted. The Zamzam well, a 3,000-year-old well that supposedly held water that could cure disease and sin, was desecrated with pilgrim corpses. But worst of all, the Kaaba, the holiest structure in the Islamic faith, was ruthlessly destroyed, and the black stone, the Al-Hajar al-Aswad, housed on the east side of the Great Cube, the stone that was placed by Muhammad himself, said to have come from heaven and originated from the Garden of Eden itself, was stolen, relocated to Al-Hassa, the new capital of the Qarmatians. Abu Tahir al-Janabi was said to have mocked the hiding and fleeing pilgrims of either citing verses from the Quran or singing his own twisted poetry. Where are the birds of God to defend your great city? It is proved God has abandoned you. I am by God, and by God I am. He creates creation, and I destroy them. You say that whoever enters here shall be secure. So where is the security when we have done
what we have done?
This would be the official break of the Qarmatians from Islam as a whole. Even though other Ishmaeli sects had different beliefs from other sects, the Qarmatians had crossed a line that wouldn't be recovered, and that was the idea. Abu Tahir was fine with this split, as some has speculated that he wasn't even a Muslim. I know, as he would have banned Sharia law in his domain and changed the form of prayer to the Kaaba to instead fire, an infamously Zoroastrian form of worship. Which, by the way, Abu Tahir was a Persian, and Zoroastrian was a previous state religion of the Persian Empire conquered by the Muslims. By 950, the Qarmatian kingdom was at its golden age. It took tribute from the Abbasids in Baghdad and the Fatimids in Cairo. It had very lucrative trade deals in the Persian Gulf, and was almost completely unopposed for a period of 30 years. They were the hottest shit in the Middle East, and everyone feared their wrath. This golden age though would not last, as after Abu Tahir died in 944, things would begin to crumble. Their legitimacy as a major threat would slowly fade over the decades because of simple ignorance by the new leaders and imams of the state, and general incompetence. Over time, the Abbasids and Fatimids would cease any sort of tribute, Bedouin tribes would raid their towns and trade caravans, and fewer powers would want to trade with them, and the Black Stone was returned to Mecca by persuasion of the Imam of Cairo in 952, after a hefty ransom too. The Qarmatians would thus be reduced to nothing but a local power that was almost incapable of defending themselves. Bahrain broke away in 1058 under the leadership of Abu al-Balul al-Awam, who re-established Orthodox Islam on the island as a final fuck you to the Qarmatians. Similar revolts removed Qatif from the Qarmatians' control all about the same time. Deprived of all outside income and control of the coasts, the Qarmatians retreated to their stronghold at the Hofuf Oasis. The Qarmatians would simply fade away from records, as in 1068, Hofuf would be laid siege for 7 years by a combined Bedouin and Seljuk army to silence their raids, ending their dynasty for good. So, what can we learn from the Qarmatians? Well, pirates are assholes, and people just want to watch the world burn. The Qarmatians really didn't contribute much to world history outside of their acts of malice, destruction, and religious terrorism on their neighbors, and made a stain on the Muslim faith that would only be recovered centuries after their existence. But if you made it this far, then I sincerely thank you, and I recommend you like and subscribe for more mini documentaries of obscure kingdoms, empires, and cultures around the world in the future. I'm Claude, and thank you for watching.